So after the explosion of the singularity last time, Amari finds herself in another world entirely. In fact, this is her original world, the one she was stolen from by the Keepers, with her memories of her life before she was stolen all rushing back, as Iori once more stalks her, invading the world with a legion of golems, despite this also being his world of origin as well, and he and Amari previously having been classmates. Sparrow showing up with the Zelgard so she can fight them off solo. The irony being, this world where they were pulled from, it is one entirely without magic, Amari not able to access any of her skills. Which begs the question why they were called from this world to begin with to serve a magic cult, whom you'd think would want those with greater magical potential. The only reason Iori can even fight them here is because the Keeper's auto-warlocks have their own mana batteries in the event they're severed from ambient sources of mana. Iori overwhelmed by that same hatred seen of Selric before, which is better contextualized here as a corruption rooted from overindulgence in En's power, which Amari has to break him from. And I do all that in one shot, thanks to the power of stacking the boosts of Lelouch's tactical commands, as everyone else has been warped to this world as well. After which, there's such a tear in Iori's mental domination that Amari can drag Iori over to the very same park she visited, to remind them both of the lives that were stolen from them, back when they were Iori Aoi and Amari Amano, just regular high schoolers. The programming on Iori lashes out one final time, Amari being injured in it, with Iori returning to Selric in shock, and watching horrified as Selric entirely erases from existence the Keepers that were assisting Iori in the attack for their continued failure to kill Amari, as Amari is now explained as being the only threat to Selric's ascension to head of the Keepers, due to how her abilities have expanded beyond the powers granted them by End, and the position of founder that Selric covets is reserved for one that can show themselves as the ultimate sorcerer. Amari is healed back among the Knight's ships, her escaping when everyone is handing the local fallout of fictional characters and machines appearing in real life. As with Amari's memories returned, she just wants to go home. And yet the story prevents her from doing so, to allow her to have real closure with what was taken from her, so she can then move forward without any regrets. Instead, it makes it so she can't do that. Can't settle her past despite remembering it. And more important than getting closure for herself, give closure to the family she had over her disappearance. As the phone call she does give is not enough. Especially in the context of where the story ends up taking her, where she never returns to that family at all. Doing this is one of the largest mistakes the game makes, as it's a stronger character act to in-person address this. Not just see them off-screen without any real interaction, which would allow the protagonist's character to explain what happens to them, and why they'd have to leave again to take part in settling it. We actually have this in a few isekai series where the point of a character's journey is to return home, but has to go back to the other world to settle affairs and protect their home. Hell, this part is so ubiquitous, Digimon has used it in their series multiple times, starting from the original Digimon Adventure. Hell, Disney series have done this, and I'm not talking like older ones, I'm talking The Owl House and Amphibia. To subvert that for no reason just doesn't sit right, especially after how much the impact of this revelation and the lost memories' importance has had placed on them. For the character that in the next scene they call the spiritual art of the hero faction of the game, to not let them have that moment with those they most dearly love that can strengthen their resolve more than any other, to fight so they won't be affected by this insanity that has been dragged here? No. That meeting and explanation to their family had to happen for the story to take the OG protagonist in the direction it wants to. Amari explains her restored memories and everything else to the other knights, alongside the details about the founder rank that Selric wants, as in the Keeper's history no one has been granted that title. So for the player MC to be considered for it, that's big. Big enough for Selric to be as reckless as he is in trying to kill her. However, as Selri and Iori attack again, Amari collapses, still too exhausted and injured from her prior act in trying to reach her family, leaving the rest of the knights to hold him off, and the appearance of Sparrow piloting the Zelgard himself being the final thing needed to sway Iori back out of the pit the Keepers had driven him into. having hidden that he'd broken free just so he could confront Selric himself with backup from the Knights. And I kind of get where Sparrow is coming from with wanting to reject that alliance. But he, more than anyone there, has to understand the degree that indoctrination affects and changes one's mind. That one wants to make amends the second they're free instead of justifying their actions while brainwashed is usually a good sign. Especially with the one more responsible for their plight right there to kick the ass of. Unfortunately, Selric's reached such a degree of communion with End that he can just regenerate the damage we deal. But that all changes when Amari wakes up, now in command of more magical power than before, due to her hitting a point of self-actualization. Which is where we get why Sparrow and the Zelgard are so important to the Keepers to repeatedly try and drag them back. Both are intended to help cultivate the power of the true founder independently of End once a candidate is chosen. Sparrow just flipped the script on that because he hates having his own existence dictated by others, so went out of his way to choose his own candidates, the player surrogate character of the game, which he would guide into learning the power of true magic, and not just End's power. And with both Amari and Iori boarding the Zelgard at the same time now, again, there is a reason why it does not matter in this game which character you choose. Once the other gets in the mech, they're just treated as a spare mana battery anyways. It allows the Zelgard to fully awaken, and unleash the fabled divine-level magic it can wield.
すごい! なんて魔力だ!
私のすべてを見せます。ゼルガードの翼が開く。
新しい力をここに!
そして何かが生まれる。
天と地、陰と陽、そのすべての力を。
これが最後のドグマです。その名は天地神明。
Selric's defeat warps the area, returning all of the assembled to Al-warth once more, Selric licking his wounds and reporting his failure to Archmage Kil'dun, while simultaneously proclaiming his ambition will be achieved, even as the game reveals that some thing is whispering sweet nothings into Selric's ear that is driving his actions. We have a few DLC missions pop up at this point. The first being a Might Gain stage that is once more based on the story of the ninja girl Luna Naito, Mifune's spy that ends up becoming a paramour of one of Might Gain's supporting characters, Hamada. As I've already recapped that story in Super Robot Wars V when they did it over there, and there isn't that much of a difference from there beyond exclusion of the crossover elements to the story V had. It was done as a DLC mission, however, just to try and give the Might Gain cast something more than the little they've had. The second DLC mission is focused on the Buddy Complex cast as Hina has to integrate into the Twilight Knights ranks, this occurring right after they were transported to Amari's world. The issue here is, well, Dio, who had difficulty accepting an enemy defector, even with Alba's history and how long Alba's been obsessed with her being forcibly stuck in his head. This stage actually treats Dio a lot better than the rest of the Buddy Complex content has, as they depict Dio's stumbling point as more legitimate than the main storyline has. For as Dio is a military member who has suffered from Zogilla's ambition, he'd of course have a difficult time just outright accepting someone formerly of their ranks. Add in the fact Alba doesn't treat him like an asshole for it. Well, where the hell was the writing with this both in the series and earlier in the game? The same sadly is not afforded to Hina. The most she gets is wanting to be more like the Hina Alba has memory of, even though they didn't interact much at all. With the stage getting Dio and Hina over this hurdle by, of course, them saving each other in the midst of a battle against rogue golems. But in the time that we've been distracted by the Keepers and the DLC side stories, well, Dwokdar has fucked up, and fucked up big time. Not just in how the kidnapped women have all been working on their own to reform Tora O, so he's not adherent to Dwokdar's beliefs, but also in, well, how he's been using his powers on Nia. As we finally, this deep into the game, have a proper intersection with the Gurren Lagann plot. As Dwokdar, to destroy the world to achieve his own goals, awakens the messenger of Gurren Lagann's end antagonists, the anti-spiral, from within their host body. This anti-spiral, Nia, confronting Simon as the Knights make to return to Mount Sokai to confront Dwokdar himself. And with their Herald awakened, the end of all spiral beings in this universe must now come. The problem with this narratively is, thanks to Shot, Embryo, and Marianne, as explained last time, Al-warth has been established as existing within a rift between worlds and not its own full universe, which is how End feeds off the people of those worlds to sustain itself, stealing from those it is connected to. Thus, there is no universe possessing spiral beings to eradicate. It's just Al-warth, and Al-warth alone cannot generate enough spiral beings to be a legitimate threat to the anti-spiral. But Gurren Lagann's story requires there be more of a universe out there beyond just the space that is in close proximity to Al-warth, by which for the anti-spirals to consider there to be a threat to existence in the same singular universe as them. But if that's so, then it can't be positioned as a nexus point between life and death either. These points cannot be true simultaneously. You can have one or the other, but not both, because the anti-spiral's entire motivation is the preservation of the universe and all existence that is part of it. They don't count multiverse shit. Honestly, the best way to have reconciled this would have been for Lord Genome and the humans of the Land of Beasts to be refugees from a completely different universe entirely. One under assault by the anti-spirals, who tried to change universes and ended up in Al-warth themselves. Lord Genome becoming so terrified of the chances the anti-spirals would chase them down, that they suppressed their spiral power race. So when that ended, enough spiral power beings could then be born to be brought to the anti-spiral's attention. As there is dialogue which very much implies that here, but it is never stated explicitly that such is the case. That would then make for a viable parallel between Lord Genome and the anti-spiral he fought, as then the anti-spirals would have a reason to chase them down out of fear. Fear of the spiral beings awakening the very spiral nemesis entity they feared, not just in their universe, but across universes. But the problem with that is the anti-spiral is not normally a multiversal threat going out of its way to attack all life anywhere, as they were just concerned with protecting life within solely the universe they lived in, with at worst them trapping spiral energy life forms in pocket dimensions, so the threat would be isolated and sealed off from the well-being of their soul universe. Moreover, because Dwokdar artificially activated Nia's hidden anti-spiral gene to turn her into a messenger by which to begin the invasion, there's also the potential issue of there not being enough of a spiral power population to legitimize an assault against a threat, considering less than a third of the planet consists of those who can harness spiral energy. Though, as I explained before, the spiral nemesis is supposed to be Gurren Lagann's OC Do Not Steal, homage to the threat of Getter Robo's Getter Emperor, a convergence of such evolutionary-derived technology advanced into existence far faster than the capacity for its creators and user to understand it, that it becomes a threat to all life in the universe, as that entity goes from wanting to protect life to being about that life acting in servitude to the perfection of itself. And from the perspective of the Getter Emperor being a multiversal threat, thus making the Spiral Nemesis one of comparable danger, the anti-spirals potentially escalating their Nemesis panic to the point they could possibly go multiversal, well, that isn't the craziest idea out there. It's just a harder one to swallow on its own without build-up to it. The irony being that those forces that fear such an entity are far more likely to be the cause of why it is born, as the ones they attack out of fear of it then create the enemy to all existence out of the sheer will to survive. The Getter Emperor and Spiral Nemesis thus being considered a form of weaponized survival instinct taken to the most extreme. Hell, there's been a theory that's popped up on and off about Gurren Lagann the Spiral Nemesis the anti-Spiral fear might be Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann itself, or at least a version of that super machine that exists in a more permanent fashion than the one that briefly appears at the climax of the series before its power and ability to access it is completely dissipated. So yeah, Simon is distraught as the Twilight Knights come under attack by the advanced scouts of the Anti-Spiral amidst a battle with the forces of Olympus, forcing Olympus themselves to flee upon their sensing of them. The other more ancient beings, as well as Nemo, on our side recognizing their primal threat to all normal life not part of their own. Though the issue here, as opposed to your other enemies, is the sheer number of drone units the Anti-Spiral send out, which are all intended to exhaust those they face first and foremost. Fortunately, we get backup in the form of the expanded Daiguren forces finally joining us in battle. Specifically the kids Gimme and Derry, second banana Kitan, and finally best girl Yoko Littner joining us as well at last. And it's far overdue. Not counting the Route Splits, DLC, and special stages, this is stage 40. Simon and Gurren Lagann joined us at stage 10, 60% of the game ago. I would have settled for just Yoko and maybe Kitan joining us around stage 26 to better space them out. Granted, I'm also one that prefers Yoko in her original outfits, plus the jacket she gets that makes her look perfectly click, whereas I'm not a big fan of the Space Stripper one. I guess it's more a matter of where her original one, regardless of how skimpy it is better aesthetically balanced, while her space one just isn't. Regardless, as this is a big unit acquisition stage, it gives you plenty of enemies to show them off. Or even make them regulars to your deployed units if you'd like to for Kitan or Yoko, with them backing up Simon in every way that matters in him trying to get to Nia, only to find her long gone, and not in a state to be reasoned with, as her programming is telling her that for the crime of even being born, everyone has to die. A way for more anti-Spiral forces to arrive having been opened by Dwoktar and Olympus's forces, manipulating Mazinger Zero. Its epicenter is found up in space as Rossiu, one of the Gurren Lagann cast members who specialized as a scientist, interrogates the head of Lord Genome over everything relating to the Anti-Spiral. And as I said, the game stops just short of saying that Lord Genome came here to Al-warth with Spiral War survivors. Just saying that they, too, participated in the War of Light and Darkness that was part of Al-warth's creation myth. And the Anti-Spirals were present during that conflict as well. Had the game's story chosen to be more explicit on the details of how a pocket universe's population could become the kind of threat the Anti-Spiral assumed them to be towards such a multiversal invasion, I'd have less of a critique here. Anyways, we set controls to outer space now, to face down the larger Anti-Spiral invasion force, all terrestrial limited units at this point being outfitted to be airtight, even if their animations may not actually show it, with space completely warped as it spews out more and more of the Anti-Spiral attack drone Mugens. Yeah, we have a lot of units now that have really effective map attacks, including but not limited to the Vilcus, the Gurren, then Shinkiro, Wing Zero, Tall Geese 3, Great Mike Gyn, Gurren Lagann, Psybuster, and a couple of the UC-related units. So, numbers aren't exactly an issue at this point. I think the level designers realized this, as here's this long intersection in the middle of the stage by Mike Gyn's Purple, who is here to espouse the greatness of evil, and that Dwoktar is a genius by using the Anti-Spiral as a distraction to further his own goals, since Purple's bosses are allied with him, and he is honored to get a great front row seat for the fall of such false heroes. And honestly, a difficulty in characterization that keeps popping up with Purple in the SRW games is it's hard to depict Purple's issues appropriately in a game that barely pays attention to him as an antagonist to really contextualize what his deal is and why he so embraces the aura of evil. Especially since he and his subordinates themselves are more a distraction than anything, padding things out, but ultimately only here to serve the Wataru storyline thanks to an appearance by Tora O and Sally, who says that everyone's death is meaningless as then there'd be no one to rule. And Purple attacks the son of their benefactor because of it, only for his attempts to attack the pair being dispersed thanks to the aura of innocence from Sally that disrupts the aura of evil Purple is over-reliant on. Anti-Nia brings out the Cathedral Lazengon as the final boss of the stage, that being the robot form of the Cathedral Terra, which was Lord Genom's capital ship in the backstory of Gurren Lagann. It requiring Simon's allies still on Al-warth launch the ship originally intended to be the intermediary connection between a smaller godman and the Terra to knock it back.
パワー比べならグレン・ラガンは負けねえ。気合い入れろよビラリ。言われるまでもない。シモン、オッケーよ。行っちゃって。ドーッ。必殺時空列弾バーストスピリングパンチ。
シモン、私は
With the unit disabled, but unfortunately its massive moon-sized bulk risking crashing catastrophically onto the planet, Lord Genom instructs Simon on how to use the Gurren Lagann's core drill to take control of the Cathedral Terra. Simon forced to confront Anti-Nia inside, who speaks of the despair of mortality inevitability, that he will have to smash through her if he wants them to survive, which he won't. Not until they're married, at least. What, everything Kazuki Nakashima has ever written is chock full of innuendo. But yeah, Simon recognizes and calls out her actions, as all cries for help. Her being the worst she possibly could in the fulfillment of her orders in hopes that Simon would, 1. Gain the resolve to never stop fighting and kill her in doing so, or 2. Lay down his arms so only the minimal amount of damage needed would be done, or so their end could be painless. She never considered, 3. He would become even more devoted in doing everything he can to save her, because that is what it means to love someone with everything one has. Nia backs down. The Cathedral Terra turned over to the Land of Beast technicians to be converted into the Choginga Daiguren that will debut in a later stage, and so we're coming in with a new end-powered dogma that destroys the dimensional distortions to reset everything in the realm for the time being. But that will only go on for so long. Especially as End has woken up, is actively directing the Keepers now, and is very, very hungry. I don't think we have enough stickers bars to be able to satisfy that tree. If you've gotten 10 different units to Ace Pilot status, as well as raised the attack point customization scheme for Sparrow to level 5, the Secret Stage Schwarzenegger's secret pops up at this point. And like with V, this stage's existence is to solely supply the player with a massive amount of game credits and attack points with which to use to max out as many playable characters as possible. The problem is it pops up too early, as we still have units that will be recruiting in this game. However, there is a reason for it, as we find Schwarzenegger with a bunch of beastmen working together as a gang which we defeat. Upon that defeat, the actions against him having broken the curse afflicting him, which reverts him to his original form. That was actually a mild-mannered factory foreman. This alongside the plot with Kurama earlier tipping off the Knights to the fact that every member of Dwokdar's army has likely been cursed and had their moralities twisted into serving the man, and we just need to get them to surrender for the magics to lose their hold. More DLC missions happen at this point, the first of which features the G-Reco crew on space debris cleanup, to prevent that debris striking down on inhabited areas of Al-warth, and running into the Torsanga aces as consequence, who were all oblivious to the anti-spiral threats, and Klim's antics getting them all to a battle where they charge us, only for it to be discovered that not all of the anti-spiral units had been destroyed, leading to a lot of them teaming up to deal with the greater menace, which actually shows some of the merit of the characters when they are not stuck conforming to the Tamino originating script. Of particular note being the dynamic between the character Mani and her boyfriend, who happens to be Mask. Not that many would actually know that, as I cannot name a moment in the game where that is brought up. Then again, that's the power of Aiki Takagaki at work again, as she voices Mani, which once more makes it a bit disappointing for Subakrisk shippers that the two Symphogear actresses once again do not interact at all in one of these games, as by the time we do recruit Mani in the next few stages, basically all character interaction time between supplementary characters is all over and done with. The second DLC stage here is one I alluded to back when I reviewed V, when we had a similar stage there. Yes, it is the one that asks the question, who is best girl, among the various cast members involved here. Unfortunately, it again happens too early, for we're missing 3 potentially recruitable women, Puru 2, Barara, and Mani. When we had the same mission in V, its plotting did change to accommodate Jill, Marita, and Melda, whether you succeeded in saving/recruiting them or not, and yet that courtesy is not shared with X's version of the same mission. The framing for this being that Wataru's Shibaraku, being a mildly perverted samurai, is trying to decide who among the assembled hero party is the woman among them he likes the most, ignoring that several of them either already have paramours, are not interested in men in the case of most of the Cross Ange cast, or might be like Aiba and Yoko, and are still in mourning with regards to them losing past loves. He asks Amari to teach him how to better empathize with women so he may try to court one, and Walter's praising encouragement starts the ball rolling as the other women start compare-contrasting themselves against Amari's traits. I mean, there's a reason I'd wish I'd known of this character before I recorded footage of this game to change the character proxy name to match, as yeah, that would have been funny. Seriously, I discovered the sheer fun of the Iruma series literally 6 months after I finished my game capture for this review. There was no way I was going to be able to go back to redo it. It is, unironically, CC that begins the conversation's escalation into a sheer argument with how abrasive she is, leading to Sparrow to intervene to have the women all work it out through a battle in their respective machines. Yeah, while I am overwhelmingly biased in Callan's favor, let's just face it, her using the area effect blast of the Radiance Wave Surger to literally pop nearly everyone like meat balloons would be in poor taste. She prefers close combat anyways, and is unlikely to use the Wave Surger on someone she actually likes because, unlike Marianne, to which she is compared, she's a tsundere and not a psychopath. For those of you asking in the audience, what's the difference? Shame on you. We've discussed that already earlier this very year on the difference between a tsundere and a violent bitch. If you've not already, please watch my videos on Tales of Graces F. That's where that discussion is. And really, outside of the Crimson Lotus, the most likely ones to survive such a no-holds-barred battle among those here would be Ange, Marvel, Noin, and Yoko, with CC only escaping because, you know, she's still cursed with immortality. Sadly, this stage doesn't really give a lot of the matchups for the fake-out tournament of the early stage between the girls. The most relevant of such being Ange and Callan not being paired up against each other, nor are Vivian and Puru despite, you know, those two being the young mascot girls. I kinda don't follow the logic of several of these matchups as they kinda feel a bit more, I don't want to say superficial, but as if the writer of the stage pulled the matchups out of a hat and then attempted to backwards engineer reason. The one exception to that being the match, or rather, rematch of Callan and CC, who last faced each other during Code Geass's Battle of the Pacific, where Callan was at the time hyper-focused on trying to save Lelouch from himself, and CC was there because Yukana Nogami needed her paycheck for voicing her. CC even recontextualizing the event to help free Callan of lingering doubt in herself over those days, before proceeding to tease her about why she might want to win this contest. And then this, like before, going too far due to the group's ridicule of the defeat equals friendship trope being nonsense made up for shonen manga, when Lelouch proposes that this might settle their animosity. Despite that trope being more common to shoujo manga and magical girl series in general. Cases in point of that being Lyrical Nanoha, Cardcaptor Sakura, Symphogear, certain parts of Sailor Moon, My Life as a Villainess, All Routes Lead to Doom, Revolutionary Girl Utena, and a grand majority of the Precure series that I am aware of. And then CC mocking the idea of Callan being a protagonist or heroine at all, which I already discussed at length about in the actual Code Geass reviews, about her actually being the intended deuteragonist and main heroine within the narrative framework of Code Geass' story, and one Lelouch's plans deliberately left in the heroine role in the aftermath of the Zero Requiem plot so she wouldn't be harmed by her connection to him. And it was CC, narratively, who acted as a parasitic story device stealing her place in the world, despite having no purpose existing as part of it. The ups and downs of this one concluding with such hateful barbs at the end is why I kinda wish the matchup had been Callan versus Ange instead, as an ace of aces duel among the best pilots of this group, and to further the spiritual mother-daughter parallel the two have. Hell, expand on the fandom's observed joke of Ange's commonality with Lelouch and Callan by the snap realization that had been avoided all game, but which to have the observers go, oh no, there's two of them. Late, yes, but part of what the SRW DLC does is fill in moments like that which don't fit the main story, and that's a pretty significant one. It would have been better than reviving a fandom's argument instead. Like, yeah, it's a completely comedic stage, but when it explicitly compounds the biggest mistake of an involved series and lampshades something fans hate, that's not a good look. Really, the only one of these matches I like is Hilda with Cecily, as Cecily gives Hilda very good advice about self-improvement and getting her to let down her barriers to allow her to be honest towards Ange, so she can get the other woman to reciprocate her feelings, since the game hasn't depicted that canonical event as happening yet, despite Hilda's repeated statements over her feelings for Ange. Of course, like when I discussed V's version of this stage, the maps of this pickup tournament are interrupted by mook units of their enemies, in this case being a bunch of rogue golems. So the entire matter ultimately ends up unsettled, with the assembled girls realizing that had they actually gone all out, well, it would have been the aforementioned slaughter, with Ange permitted to be the one to deliver Sparrow's punishment when they all collectively realized that this entire thing was a setup from the beginning. Moving on, back on Mount Sokai, Dwokdar's minions are having trouble following Dwokdar's train of thought in why he would want the Anti-Spiral to attack and destroy Al-warth. But his reasoning has some logic to it in that the worlds can be rebuilt after a civilization is destroyed, and since he is not a spiral being, the Anti-Spiral aren't a huge threat to him. Plus their attack has given him more time to revive the Dragon of Darkness by using his hostages as ritual sacrifices to it. Dwokdar at this point ordering Don Goro to execute them at the nearest ley line, which is where we finally have an appearance by Exev again, for him to be involved in doing such an unrepentant act of evil. Goro tries to argue in favor of not killing the hostages. After all, Tora's gotten attached to all of them, and it disrupts any attempt to bring him to heel as Dwokdar's ultimate successor. But as is true of all truly evil individuals, they could not give a shit over who they harm or let come to harm, as long as it gets them what they want. For Dwokdar, that's the world the way he wants it, and for Exev, it's just the entertainment from the chaos to feed his benefactor. Oddly enough, it's just Sally, Relina, and Queen Sayla's that are going to be sacrificed. Marimea is being kept for some other purpose. But the act they're going to be participating in has the rest of the Black Diamond League having second thoughts. Wolfgang revealing he's almost got down a means of disrupting the Dark Aura that gives Purple and Exev their power, and their inability to do anything against those two is the only reason why the Mike Guine antagonists even follow them at this point. Dispel that, and they'd leave as they'd have nothing to fear from them anymore. So as long as his cohorts can stall for time, they can actually help the knights and save the girls. Be the heroes for once in this messed up world. And this is a point I don't focus on enough, but for as selfish as they are, Mike Guine's recurring bad guys aren't that bad a bunch of people. They do have standards, and both Purple and Exev cross even their moral lines. Purple calls out the knights for a confrontation, all a taunting act so the knights can fall into despair from their failure to save the girls. But that arrogance puts the cart before the horse, especially as his soldiers acting as cannon fodder are themselves at the point of rebellion. Toro himself tries to intervene, not wanting the women who have been kind to him to die, though thinks that if he defeats Waltru, then Dwokdar would allow them to be spared. He's wrong, but there is once more a logic to this belief because he doesn't know about Dwokdar's greater intent in killing them. But that doesn't matter, as once Wataru defeats Toro, he feels like he can't face his father anyways, as he couldn't go all out against those he considered friends. So ends up defecting and joining us, with him confronting Purple in his carrier ship and rescuing Sayla, Sally, and Relina himself. Joe and Banjo Haran following him in afterwards, and preventing Purple from just killing him in retaliation. And with Sally rescued, Wolfgang's Innocence Wave Amplifier is all ready to go, which dispels Purple's evil auras, and allowing them to actually take damage now.
よーし、大物を狙ってやる。ジャコマルの真の力を見せてやるぜ。チェンジタイガー！デビルタイガーミサイル。こいつでとどめだ。必殺タイガーソード。
また諦めてなかったか。
And when Purple tries to regenerate his health this time, that's when the Double Drive Wheel Sword attack unlocks once again, defeating Purple and freeing the lesser members of the Black Diamond League from their need to fight to survive. Them all heading back to Auto City to retire for the time being from their lives of crime, with Sealess Salvation permitting the Aura Battlers to get their closure for the events of their series, and Hiro and Maito reuniting after all this time with their respective paramours. However, that leads to the question of why Marimeya has been kept separate from them, which they think might have to do with dealing out suffering and pain from people that might be feeding this dragon of darkness to awaken it. The 3 sacrifices here being one of those ways to do so, or at least help along that plan by tainting the ley lines of the planet through which magical power flows. Which thus brings us to the final route split of the game. The Keepers of Order at this point have taken command over all the remaining Otherworlders, while Dwokdar's plans need to simultaneously be confronted, the routes once more splitting all the Gundam teams and Buddy Complex characters off into space, while literally everyone else will assault Dwokdar. I go off to handle the Earth side of this first, which begins this set of 3 scenarios with Anya being tormented by dreams of Marianne, reliving the years she'd lost thanks to the older woman's possession of her body, which leaves her unwell as the terrestrial group has to skirt around the Keeper's main territory to reach Mount Sokai. Considering how many times we've tried to go back to that mountain now only to be subverted, there's got to be better routes at this point. Well, there are, but doing so would help distract the Keeper forces that's assisting the Otherworlders in the same way our heroes have been distracted time and again. Unfortunately, they are not as distracted as the team presumed, and it's instead our group that are distracted by Stupid Hair once more teleporting himself inside the ship, and trying once more to grab Ange, Nadia, and any woman who fits his fancy. That allows the Keeper's forces to sneak up on us. We crush them after Amuro briefly tries, and fails to reason with them. But that's not all. Embryo returning in his Hysterica to show these feeble mortals the power made possible by becoming an immortal being, in order to convince all of them to join him in opposing the Keepers, with him assaulting their temple during this. Exev comes in with the same offer, them also seeking the same goal, a completely reborn world. It just being an argument at this point which of the end bosses deserves the right to be its godly creator. Stupid Hair retreats, with Exev in turn summoning a large army of units which all have been enhanced by Exev's mastery of Evil Aura. And while Great Might Gain has a good means of calling these units thanks to Sally's Innocence Waves, that doesn't spread to the rest of them. Meaning every allied mech has to one-shot each of these units. A not insignificant task unless one takes advantage of the boosts of Lelouch's tactical commands. Appropriate considering Exev despises the idea of justice and considers it weak, while Lelouch's truest self is a Knight of Justice that rallies those perceived to be weak to achieve greater goals. Though we get an amusing tac point bonus exchange on this stage that I wish happened more often than it actually does. See, Exev has this weird, almost phobia-level distaste for drills, to the point he's always ending up killed by them. So considering Simon and Gurren Lagann are here, you can get a special interaction between him and Simon if you have them fight. It's not a lot, but it's still nice to see. But even Exev's actions here are a distraction so Embryo can sneak in and grab Nadia again. him also succeeding in snagging Ange from the act, which ends the stage on a cutaway of, in the temple devastated by Embryo, Selruk kills Kil'din, claiming it is Ange's desire alongside Dwok'tar and Embryo to remake the world entirely, so End will never go hungry again. And Selruk will be the one to satiate its appetite. Also note that the main plot of the game is solely being addressed in this route. The Keepers, Dwok'tar, and Embryo, all on their world revision scheme. Yeah, it's kind of telling how much over time all the Gundam cast members just came to weigh down that story. Which is unfortunate, as I like the Wing cast, yet they've been given nothing to do even though they were introduced as being in the middle of Endless Waltz's story. Hell, even Stupid Hair's character is finally, for the most part, working again with the character no longer being slave to the worst executed Sunrise series, as this stage is a recreation of the climax of Cross Ange in Stupid Hair's own personal dimensionally displaced Arzenal. The biggest issue here then becomes in how Stupid Hair in this version of the story has a crap ton of clones created through splintering his essence across differing possibilities, and projecting it into multiple physical forms simultaneously. Point of order.
Say your prayers, God.
No, wait! You're quite passionate, aren't you? Although, I suppose that is a good quality to look for in a wife.
Yeah, Embryo's true incarnation has been trapped here, and in the normal reality, anytime he's shown up, it's because a physical form has been projected by his Ragnamail, the Hysterica. And because it's a projection, that's why you can't kill him. He's not really there. He's immortal because he's unstuck from the normal flow of time. He has his dimension distorting technology because of an accident. His designer humanity and magic system are both perversions of science. His mental domination only achieved thanks to backdoors he programmed into his designer humanity. And his undying state all achieved because he's never actually where people try and attack him. Unless it involves where he's been trapped on true Arzenal. He's the Wizard of Oz. All his might and magic's all smoke and mirrors achieved by a greater understanding of technology and the universe than those he proclaims his godhood over. With all his claims to power, lies validated because of his undying state. So Embryo being able to splinter himself like this in the place where he is supposed to have the least power? Yeah, no, that's a bit more difficult to swallow. It's even though the stage has us fight a bunch of reproduction hystericas that could all be projecting into reality their own versions of Embryo, it calls into question how he's even controlling them. Hell, if he can make duplicate hystericas to begin with, then why did he even need any of the normal members of Arzenal to pilot the other Ragnamail to begin with?
It just raises too many questions.
And again, Cross Ange answers this crap on why he can or can't, a lot of which is tied back to Stupid Hair's god complex and ego. Why should I make more? I have perfectly serviceable ones already. I need pilots, so I'll offer my kindness to the women I've made the world cast out of society. I can't make more of my beautiful machines, so only I will be around. After all, the universe only deserves to have one of me. These are not actual lines he speaks, but all of that is clearly inferred by the smug arrogance of him, where he clearly considers everything that exists to already be his. So why share with others, even copies of himself, what he truly deserves? Hell, him even existing in this pocket universe outside of time, on principles prevents the idea of him self-replicating, as the idea of him being the world tuner and bearing special powers because of it is hinged on the idea that he himself is a multiversal singularity. Key to that being singular. One. His experience made him individually unique across multiverses, so only one of him is supposed to exist. So you can't even play with the idea of him calling upon doppelgangers or time paradox duplicates to explain that without invoking further complications. For those not familiar with the concept of the multiversal singularity, Consider watching the film Everything Everywhere All at Once, as that's part of what that film is playing with concerning Jobu Tabaki and the Everything Bagel. Except instead of one person alone existing in the multiverse, it flips it into one person's consciousness existing simultaneously across all universes they exist in. Which is another legitimate interpretation, but not the one Cross Ange was utilizing, which is more like Jet Li's film The One. Ange, of course, resists all of Stupid Hair's sexual advances and attempts to screw with her senses until the rest of the knights arrive. Brought here by Stupid Hair in this iteration in order to force them to agree with his plans by revealing to them the truth of Al-warth, which this cast doesn't even bother to listen to, as there's no word that would come from his mouth that any of them would possibly trust. I have Callan smash the Hysterica in one blow, which makes Stupid Hair send in the clones. But in doing so, he still reveals the way to defeat him in this incarnation remains the same as the original series. The multiversal doppelgangers can all be banished from existence simply by destroying the dimensional nexus point that this version of Arzenal exists in, which will cut them all off. But as he proclaims and espouses on his genius and culpability in other plots that he really should not have had any involvement in, he keeps giving away time and again the way to defeat him. And I'm like, Stupid Hair is pathetic as a person, but he's not this stupid. Like, why would you keep telling us the one way to defeat you, when we have that specific means by which to cause that very thing? As said, this is a dimensional rift, and what collapses dimensional distortions and rifts? The Ragna Male's Discord Feather attack, meaning Ange has the specific way to kill him. He knows that, and that is the specific reason why he keeps trying to court her, so she can't use it against him. Except she's not the only one with that attack either. You'll all recall that of the other Cross Ange mecha, Salamandes and Ryugo can also cast that to collapse the rift, as exampled when Sala and Ange prevented Stupid Hair's attempts in series to distort the dimensions to destroy and overwrite the dragon's Earth. There's consequently no reason for him to be gloating like this. But this isn't even the worst part of this. Oh no, that has to be who actually deals with this dimensional rift. As it's not Sala, it's not Ange, it's not even a member of the Cross Ange cast. Oh no. Well, V involved Lacus Klein to make her be part of the events that brought down the dimensionally displaced Arzenal there. That was justified as it had been part of a story-long arc where everyone part of Ange's world in that game played their own parts in bringing down the abuser at the top, to end a long cycle of atrocities due to him being built up as an even grander bad guy than the original series had. And it was still Ange that was the principal player in taking him down. But here, the heroine of her own story doesn't even get a say in the matter. Her agency is robbed once again. For instead, it's put on the buddy complex characters, who were not part of this stage at any point previously, to pop over from the space side of the route split to break in here and disrupt the spatial stability of this place that, again, the Cross Ange cast should be able to do themselves. To compare, all V did was have Lacus Klein sing the true star song that awakens the full power of the Ragnamales in concert with Ange. Ange was involved. Lacus was supporting Ange, so she still remained the point woman of focus in resolving the threat of her story's central villain. And yet here, Embryo's plans are all being thwarted by a trio of characters that have nothing to do with him! Which is another showcase of how the agency of the Cross Ange story keeps being entirely robbed from them in this game by a property that is not deserving of it. V didn't rob them or any others of those very things. It worked to bring them all together. Yet the only way this game has ever found to prop up Buddy Complex and G-Reco in the story is to take from other series while tearing everyone else down, and blaming others for their series' own failings. And that, dear audience, is not how such matters should ever be handled. I'll give this iteration of this battle one thing, however. Because there are so many spare Stupid Hairs here, it allows nearly the full cast of characters who were wronged by him to each be able to tear out their own pound of flesh from him. But that's the only real merit to how X handles this. The Vilk is at this point gaining access to his true ability Unlock Attack, which features a bit of new animation added onto it from V's version. But that's pretty much the only bonus to this approach, since this really should have retained the Cross Ange cast at this point on this, as Super Robot Wars normally operates with regards to antagonists associated with given series, which makes the divergence from it that X does all the more jarring. However, we're not done. As the last embryo dies, not really, there is unfortunately a couple left, one of which is on the space route, which we'll see feature before we're done with this loser. And the group attempts to go grab Nadia. It's revealed that dream Anya had of Marianne, yeah, that wasn't a dream. Marianne using her Gios to return to spirit form and possess Anya, waiting in the back of her head while Stupid Hair was an active antagonist, so as to bide her time. Her using power gained from Al-warth, I presume at least, to clone herself a copy of Anya's mech, the Mordred, by which to then abduct Nadia again and escape from the collapsing dimensional rifts. Gloating all the while that this is the key to continuing Stupid Hair's plan, which will allow her to revive her husband from beyond death. So, here's my question. Why didn't Marianne just have Shot and Embryo build her, or hell, with Stupid Hair's purported multiversal access with all his clones, steal her a copy of the Mordred? On top of that, considering Marianne's canonical backstory as the greatest mecha pilot in Code Geass's history, before Callan's ascension at least, the game could feasibly have put her in any nightmare from that series. Say, Bismarck Waldsten's unit the Galahad, considering Bismarck was the only one who could beat Marianne, though only when Bismarck used his future side Geass actively. As Marianne's specialty, as indicated by her epithet of the Flash, is she's a pilot that specializes in high-speed, heavy-hitting blitzkrieg attacks, whereas the Mordred is nothing like that as a machine, as it's a slow, heavily armored, heavy assault unit over-reliant on its float system to even move. That better fit Anya's skills, but it is a handicap for Marianne, who doesn't fight like that. Hell, as I said, part of the character parallels between Callan and her is Callan fights like Marianne was said to in lore. But the only reason Marianne has a copy of the Mordred now is because it was already programmed into the game. Oh, and yes, it is hilarious parallels that the best pilots in the Code Geass universe are not only women, but ones that can only be defeated through tricks and the supernatural. Though in their retreat, the villains let slip of Nemo's poorly kept secret, that Nadia is his daughter, and he couldn't just tell her for the sole reason that she wouldn't accept it. As the rift collapses, the Knights are expelled back to the base of Mount Sokai, so while Nemo's distraught over Nadia still being gone, he can compartmentalize the loss due to his age and wisdom to not affect him actively. Which compare-contrasts him in Lelouch on this, where in a similar situation with Callan, due to his age and loss complex, was not able to maintain the same objectivity. The Knights rush repairs to their machines, but them trying to strike at Mount Sokai is still pointless. I didn't mention it earlier in the story, but the reason why we needed to revive the Shinbei Rainbow Dragons to restore the rainbow over Mount Sokai is because there is a barrier over the mountain that prevents unauthorized interlopers from reaching it, with them instead having to return to where the game started, Manja Village, at the foot of the mountain, where Wataru was originally summoned. The Elder residents recognizing the Neo Nautilus as the 4th generation fast-and-life interstellar cruising super dreadnought all-purpose space battleship Excellion. For those who don't get the joke, the Excellion is the battleship featured in the Gainax OVA series Gunbuster, and the Neo Nautilus was designed to be aesthetically similar to the Excellion, as the Excellion was just that good of a design. I explained that as it's a what the hell sort of out of context line, where those who aren't aware of the joke won't get the joke. And unfortunately,
If you have to explain a joke, there is no joke!
the elders of the village informed them of what the problem is, as while they collected the treasures of the dragons, there's a final one they couldn't retrieve until now, as it would only appear when the others were gathered. The paired Ryuo's sword and Ryujin's shield, which can shatter the barrier over the mountain. But Dwaktar's forces have detected them nearing, and have sent out every single one of their generals to face us down, the stage giving up tack points if Simon and Viral defeat Cruising Tom, Lelouch crushes Death God, Koji takes out Soya Soya, Ange defeats Dr. Cosmos, Genryusai battles Axe Smoggle, and Todd defeats Bibi Baba Debu, matching how each of these characters has impacted the stories of the opposite facing them throughout the game. This is how such story amalgamation is supposed to be done. This is how V handled Cross Ange's story alongside the other properties it included, and is how X has not been handling it in turn. That the wrong way to use such, and the right way to execute such, have been so closely placed together, leaves me once more baffled at the mistakes in this game, and once more tie it back to the stories that shouldn't have been here to begin with. And the full circle journey this represents actually does work well for providing closure for these assorted characters. The ones that are on their post-story extensions, at least. Not to say the material with Koji, Viral, Ange, and Genryusai is bad per se, but the Lelouch and Todd beats of this are far stronger overall. However, with the tier bosses defeated again, it allows more Dwoktar allies to take focus, such as the Great General of Darkness who invades and swallows the entire village in dark power, revealing that he has, in fact, found the Ryuo sword, which Dwoktar had discovered alongside the rest of the relics, and corrupted into a blade befitting a being of the Blackest Night. Great, and he didn't even need to play the Claw of Hermos to seal the Dark Dragon within it. Of course, the Mazines are here to deal with the General, but in my consistent presentation of Callan being an amazing pilot, I find it more appropriate to instead steal back a Dragon Sword by using the power of a mech that draws its final form's inspiration from Yi Drag Gok of Wales, acting counter to Albion. But when the Great General loses the sword, the corruption from it goes wild, risking the destruction of the entire area due to how deeply it twists reality. But this is in turn the purpose of the other trinkets of the mountain, to control the power of the Ryuo sword and counter what can happen when it is used wrongly, which allows Watru to suppress its own rampancy, and reveal the Ryujin shield was hidden within the Senko bracer, which could only awaken in response to the proximity of the Ryujin sword, and it being wielded by someone who has proven themselves over the course of their journey as a true savior. The Great General admits his defeat, dying from his injuries, which finally clears the way to Mount Sokai itself. Next time, we wrap things up with the other side of the final route split, the confrontation with the Anti-Spiral, the true power of End, and the grand reason why no matter how flawed this game is, I still consider it a better Code Geass tale than Resurrection delivered to us.